Once again, we are lucky enough to have Harry Haythorne, who is a man of many parts, vaudevillian dancer, ballet master, artistic director, and the rest, back in the studio with us. And welcome back again, Harry. It's wonderful for you to come back in again.
Oh, thank you again for inviting me.
I'm so charmed that you could be bothered to give us the time, and we are just delighted. Now, when we last spoke, you were about to head to New Zealand.
Yes, I think I was telling you that during the time I was with the Queensland companies, both with the University of Technology and with the Queensland Ballet, I had opportunities to work in other countries, and one of the places I worked was New Zealand. I was invited to stage a ballet by a choreographer called Walter Gore, a ballet called Street Games. So I mounted this for the company, and one day the chairman of the board came past me and pushed a little envelope into my hand and said, don't open that now. Open it when you get home, and it's not a joke, it's serious. And so, of course, the moment he was out of the door, I opened it, naturally. And it was saying, the note said, would I consider coming back to New Zealand as artistic director? At that time, they didn't have one, and I had been quite unaware that they, until of course I got there, that they didn't have an artistic director. So I initially said, no thanks, I'm very happy in Queensland, and I think that the university will pay me much more than, I didn't say that to them, but that was in my mind, than they would. However, they were very persistent. I returned to Queensland, and every now and again a letter would arrive saying, would I please reconsider? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that I wanted to again get back into the real professional life. Working with students, which I do now, is very interesting and I enjoy it. But there's something about actually being hands-on on the stage, arranging with ballets, arranging for dancers and helping them with their careers and so on. So eventually I thought, well, the money's not going to do me any good, the extra money that I'll get from the university in the end. I really would much more enjoy the artistic satisfaction. Yeah. So I went back to so I eventually went to New Zealand, to Wellington. The company was based in Wellington. And in those days, it's a bit different now. This was the beginning of 1981. In those days, come the summer, and Wellington used to literally close up. And nobody told me this. So I arrived in the plane, and I was met by a lady, and she said, oh, I don't know why you're here now. And I said, well, I was asked to come. And she said, well, I'm sure the office should have told you that nothing's going to happen for another 3 or 4 weeks. And I thought she meant just in the ballet company, but in Wellington at that time, nothing happened. All the department stores were closed, all the restaurants were closed, or most of them, and the town literally went to sleep, or rather, they all went on holiday. Then gradually, bit by bit, it opened up. But it was a very happy time. I was 13 years altogether in New Zealand, and the company was a delight to work with. It was much bigger company than the Queensland Ballet, not as big as the Australian Ballet. It's somewhere about halfway between. We varied in the number of dancers we had, 28 dancers most of the time. And one of the things that was interesting was that in their repertoire, there was a ballet which was the ballet I had been asked to write the notation for when I was at La Scala in Milan.
Yes, I remember that bit.
Yes, and so I now was suddenly faced with my own notation of this ballet, and I had to revive it, put it on for the company. And a very beautiful ballet called Serenade, with one of the most popular of all Tchaikovsky's waltzes.
Tchaikovsky's Serenade for Strings, well known to a lot of our listeners, I'm sure. Now, Harry, continue.
Well, one of the reasons why I loved being in New Zealand, apart from the company being a lovely company to work with, and we had some very good dancers, and had the opportunity to bring in not only local choreographers but choreographers from abroad, but the company's reputation started to rise, and we had invitations to tour Europe and tour China, and perhaps the Chinese tour was in many ways one of the most interesting, in that we had made a program of which we called Tchaikovsky Celebration, which was just, not Tchaikovsky, Stravinsky Celebration, which were 4 ballets based on the works of Stravinsky. And we had a very, very good designer, very well known here in Australia, Christian Fredrickson, although he's actually a New Zealander. But I invited him to design this program for us, and the costumes were really quite startling. So the Chinese cultural attaché said, would we tour to China, that they would be interested for us to go? And we said, yes, that would be lovely. Enjoy that. He said, could he look at some of the videos of our work? So we showed him video, and he had another gentleman with him from China, and there was looked at the video for a while, and then there was a discussion in Chinese, and then looked at a bit more of video, and then he said, Mr. Haythorne, are they wearing practice costume? And I said, no, that's the costumes that they wear. Oh, he said. And then there was a bit more talk. He said, could we see another ballet? So I showed him another ballet, and we had much the same reaction. And then eventually he said, because these costumes were very scanty, I might add, so then he said, well, I don't think that in China you can wear these costumes. And so I said, well, then we won't take the Stravinsky ballets, and I showed him some other ballets that we would take instead. So that was all right. He said, we'd be very interested to have a ballet with a Maori theme. And I had been very interested in the idea anyway. It was at the back of my mind that we should have something that reflected the Maori culture, which is so strong in New Zealand. So I invited a Maori choreographer and a Maori designer to make costumes for us, and to not make costumes, to design costumes and make a ballet for us. Ballet was called Moho. Very, very good ballet. But when I saw the costumes, they were even more scantier than the costumes that Christian Fredrickson had designed.
Oh dear.
So in the end, we had 2 sets of costumes for that particular ballet. We had the costumes which we wore in New Zealand, which were the scanty ones. And then when we went to China, we had the, because moko means the design that used to be tattooed on the Maori face, and so but it also went all over or could go all over the body. So we had tights made and the moho painted on the tights, because that was the way we got around it. But that was interesting. Also, when another strange thing happened, I was in Beijing, and suddenly a man stopped me in the street and he said, "You're from New Zealand?" I said, yes. Yeah, really? From New Zealand? Yes, we're from New Zealand. Ah, he said, bah! And went away. Very, very, very strange.
Knowledge is a marvellous thing, isn't it? Yeah. Now, something very exciting happened while you were in New Zealand.
Oh, lots of exciting things happened.
But it's a particularly notable thing.
Oh, I see.
You were given a little...
You're trying to get me to talk about my gong.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Right. No, I was awarded or became a member of the British Empire, the MBE, as in acknowledgement of the work I had done for ballet and for dance in general.
That's marvellous. Congratulations.
Well, I was very flattered to get it. But I, as I said at the time, and this is not false modesty, those kind of awards really are for... You're just the figurehead. Mm-hmm. Without the wonderful help that I had from the company and the dancers and the choreographers, and all of the people that I worked with, there was no way that such an award would have come my way.
Well, now we're going to have to get moving here because you did. You were invited to come back to Australia to do Tivoli. How did that happen?
Oh no, I retired. Except that the retirement was. We had a choreographer, Jonathan Taylor, working in New Zealand. That was my last commission. He was making a ballet for the company, and he at that time was the dean of the Victorian College of the Arts.
Yeah.
And he said, "What are you going to do when you retire?" And I said, "Oh well, I don't know." I said, "I don't think I'll stay in New Zealand. I think I want to go home to Australia, perhaps to Melbourne, perhaps to Sydney, maybe home to Adelaide." He said, "Well, if you come to Melbourne, I'll give you a job." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yes, I need somebody to teach dance history, and you've lived through most of it," which I didn't think was very flattering. But he said, "If you come back, I'll give you a job to teach dance history at the Victorian College of the Arts." And so that's how I returned to Melbourne. And I've never regretted it. It was a very interesting job at the Victorian College, and I find Melbourne a very livable city, a marvellous city to live in. But just after I came back, Graham Murphy, the artistic director of the Sydney Dance Company, was mounting his own version of the Nutcracker for the Australian ballet, and he has these old people at the beginning of the ballet who then sort of relive their past in a sense. And he asked the Australian Ballet if they would contact me and see if I would agree to become one of the old people, and I enjoyed doing that. That was a wonderful experience. I've done that 3 times now, that particular production, because it's been revived and televised and so on.
It's called Tivoli, is that right?
No, that's called the Nutcracker.
The Nutcracker, right?
But as a result of that, I was then asked if I would be in Tivoli. Now, this came about because I was sharing a dressing room with a much younger man than I, who became Graham Murphy's assistant. And in the between things in the dressing room in Nutcracker, I used to regale them with stories of my touring through the bush and tap dancing on roller skates and skipping and avoiding floods and ants and moths and all of the things that one had to avoid at that time. And he told Graham about this. Graham said to me, "Can you still do it?" I said, "I'm not sure." I said, "I'm 75 now. I'm not really sure that I can still do that." I said, "Anyway, I'll try." So I took myself off to the skating rink in Toorak and started trying to skate. And I thought, I went 3 times a week for several weeks, and I thought, this is useless. I'm not going to be able to do any of this. And then I was talking to the man who ran the rink, and he said, partly why you're not getting the skills back, he was kind enough not to mention my age. He said, part of the reason is that you're using hired skates. It would be worth your while buying a pair of skates yourself. So I went to a roller skating manufacturer. I was amazed that they still existed, and I bought a pair of skates, and once I started having my own skates, I found that gradually some of the things came back. Now, I was never able to regain all of the skills that I had when I was a young person. No. But I got a lot of them back, and then I started tapping, and then I said to Graham, I used to skip as well. He said, "Well, let's see if you can still do it." So I skipped and tap danced on skates, and then very cleverly he arranged that in the ballet Tivoli, or it was a musical really, that I was a broken down old actor who was about to be fired, and I was determined to show everybody that I could still do it, that I could still hack it, as it were. It was, I suppose, in a way, a reflection of the truth. And so I did it, and It was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the company, they were so good to work with. They didn't think, this silly old, I can't use...
Silly old goat.
Goat, thank you for that, yes. They were so helpful and so kind, and it was a really marvellous experience. So in that show I tap danced as well and became a magician and all sorts of things. It was a very splendid show, actually.
Oh, marvellous. Now listen, I think we've got another piece of music to play from that thing, Brown Slouch Hat. That was from Tivoli, was it?
That was from Tivoli. Yes, of course, it was a revival of a number that was made famous originally by Jenny Howard many years ago at the original Tivoli's. Because this show that we did was not really a recreation of a Tivoli show. It was more a sort of an evocation of what the Tivoli spirit, so that we did vaudeville type things, but rearranged in a more modern form.
Right, let's listen to the music.
It's a brown slouch hat with the side turned up, but it means the world to me. It's the symbol of a nation, a land of liberty, and the soldiers, they wear it, how proudly they bear it, for all the world to see. Just a brown slouch hat with the side turned up, heading straight for victory. Don't you thrill when young Bill passes by? Don't you beam at the gleam in his eye? Head erect, shoulder square, tunic spick and span, every inch a soldier and every inch a man, as they swing down the street and they grand, three abreast on the beat with the band. But what do we remember when the boys have passed along? Listen how I sing this song. Just a brown slouch hat with the side turned up, but it means the world to me. It's the symbol of a nation, a land of liberty.
That was being sung by Myrie Parker. Brown Slouch Hat was part of the show Tivoli, when Harry was in that. Then towards the end of that, you were given towards the end of Tivoli, you were given a sort of special... it wasn't exactly a gong, was it? No.
Well, no, it wasn't a gong. It was an award. It was for the outstanding performance of the year. And again, although it was given to me as an individual, I couldn't have done it without all of the help and the being showcased. I was showcased.
Yes.
And so... all the people who were connected, they really have a bit of that award. But nonetheless, of course, I'm delighted. It was like having the Australian version of the Oscars.
Yes, the 2001 Outstanding Performance by an Individual. And that was for your dancing, and particularly on roller skates, I believe. Tap dancing? Or do you tap dance on roller skates?
I tap danced on roller skates and skipped at the same time.
Good grief. I would like to see a video. I would like to see that. What a wonderful... Yeah, I bet you enjoyed it all.
I enjoyed every moment of it.
Wonderful. Harry, you have been such a joy to have visiting us at Golden Days Radio with your incredible story of your life and all the marvellous things you've done. And I do thank you very, very much indeed for all of us at Golden Days Radio for coming to this programme.
It was a great pleasure.